welcome this morning. I do apologize a little bit broadcasting from my bedroom here at a tennis camp in Turks and Caicos. Not complaining. Got my little 3 hours of tennis in this morning. But when I was asked to put together a panel on kind of the future of digital payments, the first thing that came to me, and working in financial technology, was looking at really what's happening in this new virtual world. And I really, I thought I had read this great UBS article 2 years back, really visionary, about, fully serving our new digital selves, right? Like, just from the onboarding process to KYC to digital ID. I mean, the reality is I haven't been in a bank branch in 2 years. And not that I don't love my bank and everything else, but I do not miss that experience. And so I really have a higher set expectations. And I had the opportunity to, handpick the panelists that I wanted to join us. And through there, today we have 3 amazing people. So first of all, Peggy Plassche, managing partner at Roar Ventures, former VP Innovation at CIBC, is on the board of a number of companies that she's also invested in, really understands wonderfully the tech world and brings phenomenal experience in. We then have Roy, and Roy, many people know Roy also as head of fintech at Mars. Roy is also part of our advisory council at Holt, as well as Peggy is one of our very esteemed advisors at the Holt Xchange. Roy is currently heading up the open banking practice lead at CGI. Very exciting steps happening in Canada in the open banking. He also is a member of the Open Banking Initiative in Canada. So really looking forward to the influence and leverage that Roy's experience is going to bring to move open banking forward in Canada. And last but not least, really, I think when I reached out to Awane and said, you want to join a finance payments? He's like, me? As you know, I'm from the AR, VR world. Yeah. I've had the opportunity to follow Awane's career, really, a great contributor to AR, VR technology in Canada. Previously exited, previously acquired business, and is now building Phenomena, which is building out the immersive AR, VR experience in gaming. And I thought, this set of great minds together to talk about envisioning what we see as a future of what I call payments in the metaverse. And so I think, really, I kind of want to reach out to each of you at this point and talk about my favorite, actually here, I'll just really high level, walking away from this here in the next 45 minutes. How far have we come in enabling fully digital banking experiences, moving about, what's happening in Web3 and metaverse? What are the opportunities for financial institutions in order to engage in the metaverse? And of course, with this, level of expertise that we have today, just a few recommendations of wisdom on moving forward. So really to kick it off, I'd like to open it up. I think let's go with Peggy. Peggy, I always love talking about, what was your aha moment? The Canada Payments put together a great report. If you haven't seen it, I recommend you do. A few things really caught me. 79% of transactions in 2020, have in terms of volume growing. I think, I never stepped outside during the pandemic, ordered everything online. But Peggy, tell me about your experience here. What have you seen really innovative around digital payments?
Thank you. Thank you so much, Elisabeth. And, great to be on the panel. And I cannot see the audience. That's unfortunate. I love digital, but that's the only thing I miss, So I to the audience. Well, listen, I might broaden it a bit than digital payments. I'm a Gen X. I think some of us are also in that category on that panel. And I'm used to do everything in person. Even if I'm in technology innovation, I was not a big person to go on YouTube to get my information. I was working with practitioners who were living in Toronto. So the second you were not in my city, I couldn't work with you, personally. So I think for me and for many, many, many people, it opens suddenly possibilities. And you're absolutely right. The opportunity to be able to pay these people digitally is obviously the backbone of all this interaction. So I'm looking at digital payments as a way to really change the way we interact with people, but also we access new learning and new growth opportunities all over the world, while maybe before I was more local, actually.
Yes, I agree. And Roy, I think certainly from your perspective, and now with CGI, how you're viewing this digital migration into a fully digital environment.
Yeah, thanks for that question, and good to be here. Thanks for the invitation to be a part of this amazing Payments Canada's panel. And so certainly, and professionally, I've been very fortunate and in having stepped out of my role at Mars Discovery District as the head of Mars FinTech and into a much more, shall we call it, white collar world, back in the management consulting world in CGI, working with a lot of the big six Canadian banks and looking at the landscape around the world at some of the most established financial institutions. I'm fortunate to be able to straddle those two worlds and continue to do so. But as far as the aha moment, I'll bring it down to a personal level, right? And for me, there have been two. And when you ask this question, I always like to try to personalize some of the experience, and I'll give you the two extremes. So from one perspective of stepping into the digital world and the financial services and payments, as my son lost one of his last baby teeth, as the tooth fairy, I had to provide, of course, cash and under the pillow overnight. And when I went to my wallet, fortunately enough, I had a couple of bills in there. But I realized when I reached in there how long it's been since I searched that compartment in my wallet, and it became almost foreign, right? And then Chinese New Year's rolls around. I have to give my kids the red packet. I have to go to an ATM. So from that perspective, it's like I felt like we really made a giant leap in that. Necessity is the mother of all inventions, and in this case, the necessity being access financial services, but going to much more digital and remote channel. But on the other hand, the other extreme where we have far to go is also during the pandemic. My wife works for a bank, and that's where our mortgage is. We had to renew our mortgage, and because we weren't going to go to a branch, everything was done by email, which is certainly a step forward. But we still had to get these documents printed, signed with wet signature, and then scanned, and then scanned back, and hoping that they got it. We had to wait for an email confirmation. None of this was automated, and so from that perspective, I see we still have many more steps to go in terms of a fully digitized financial services ecosystem or community, as far as that value chain is concerned. But so it's like 3 steps forward, but many steps to go, right? So those are the two my aha moments at the two extremes during this pandemic period.
I love the printing example because I don't know what Elisabeth and Awane think about it, because you're right. I'm doing tons of stuff, and then the last step is you have to print it, and you're like,
I know.
okay, so now it's going to take me 3 days to locate the printer.
Yeah, I still have to go to Staples, right? Because I need paper. So
Exactly.
yeah.
Thank you so much, Roy and Peggy. And I think, Awane, I'm very curious about your perspective, because I think you're already probably living in the metaverse. So, and I know that you actually have delivered in previous lives AR, VR level projects into financial services clients. And so, what has been your experience is coming through what I call ripping off the Band-Aid on digital coming out of the pandemic?
Well, to sum it up, because I don't want to hog this conversation, but to sum it up, it really is. I just find that since this pandemic, the acceleration of everything has just been absolutely incredible. And if you look at all of these new startups that are getting funded currently, that are using Web3 protocols like blockchain and all that stuff, all the pieces right now for the future, they're not only being developed and created, they're also being funded. That's the key. And so there's going to be such a massive shift that is going to happen over the next coming months, the next coming years. It's so exciting how things are going from Web 1 to Web 2 to Web 3, that whole framework to which the metaverse sits on top after that. So I'm really excited to kind of talk about these things and the rest of this this panel. So I don't want to take too much time, but this is very, very exciting, guys.
When you talk Web 3, and I don't know, like I remember when Web 2 came along, and I think it was Business 2.0 magazine, I think it was at the time, talking about Web 2.0, and I felt like I ended up sitting in the middle of Web 2.0 before I really knew what was happening. And so maybe from this group, like the perspective, let's talk about what Web 3.0 is. And Roy, we had a great conversation beforehand. We both said the word Netscape, right? It's like probably half the people in this audience do not
dating
know
ourselves.
What
We're dating ourselves, Elisabeth.
Yeah. So, like, what is Web 3.0? First one in.
Sure. I don't know if you want me to go or not.
No, I love to hear your perspective. That's what we're here.
All right. So I was kind of fortunate enough. My father is a professor at university, so I got the internet really, really early, really early when I was very young. So I kind of saw the whole evolution from Web 1 to Web 2, Web 3. And so I'll, you know what? Let me just kind of break it down, and we can work, I guess, from there. So think of Web 1 as basically it's like this one big Wikipedia. It's like a magazine. It's all hyperlinked together. And the only thing that you can own are basically its domain names, right? So there's no login, there's no interacting with posts. You can only there's only static pages basically. It's read only. There's no ads because there's no data, and there's no data, and as well, there's privacy. Nobody knew who you were, and that whole thing is between 1991 and basically in 2003, 2004. And the whole winners of all that is basically Microsoft, Netscape, and of course, around the end is Google. Okay. Then after that, we move over to Web 2.0. And basically Web 2.0 is, I would say, 2004, 2005 to today. And that is basically, it's 5 companies that own the internet. So basically, you don't own your content. When you go on YouTube, when you go on Facebook, when you go on Instagram, when you go on all these platforms, you're basically handing over your privacy. You're the product. They collect your data, and after that, they feed you ads. And the big winners of that, of course, again, are Apple, Google, Facebook, and so on and so forth. So they've kind of won that space. Then after that, you move to this exciting new thing, right? Which is Web 3.0. And that's basically all, like I said, those pieces are being built right now, those blocks, right? And basically the winner of Web 3.0, guys, it's us, right? There's no APIs because everything is open source. You're the owner of your content. Facebook doesn't own it. It's basically your content is not on Facebook servers. They can't take it down or anything. So there's good things and there's bad things about that, but basically you're the product. And more importantly, there's basically no central authority, guys. Everything is built on Ethereum blockchain. And what's really cool is your digital identity and your real identity, they're not linked. So you can have a whole kind of world that's yours, that's not linked to who you are as a person in the real world. So that's kind of like how I break down.
And I can see Roy is already, having some spasm with that identity disconnect. And I see, Elisabeth, you're asking the same.
But I keep talking. I keep, digital twin projects. I thought we're supposed to be.
Oh, guys, of course. There's some amazing things, and there's some very not nice things as well. Like, don't get me wrong. This can totally get dark. 100% for sure.
Roy?
Yeah. Look, you know what? I'm not a prognosticator. I almost couldn't get that word out. And by any means. And certainly, if there's one thing I've been taught as a child of Web 1.0, right? We talk about Netscape, but all joking aside, in the early days, I mean, I won't drag Peggy into this Gen X world, so I'll speak for myself. My first exposure to email was Gopher Mail. I don't know if any of you used it. It was a very terminal based. It was at the University of Toronto, right? And but to me, that was an amazing thing that I could message people around the world. And then Netscape, of course, was my first attachment to a browser. and say whatever you will about those early generations, about the old days of search engines. The name Alta Vista sometimes still come up and talking about history, right? But it was the beginning steps of a new world, and for many of us, we tried to predict that new world. I mean, in the Business 2.0, Fast Company was another magazine I read religiously during those times, and then of course you had the capital markets, the analysts. I can't remember the name, Henry. But anyway, so they all prognosticated that e-commerce is going to blow away bricks and mortar, and that it will replace wholesale, all the bricks and mortar businesses, and eventually we'll all be shopping online. And of course, in retrospect, that didn't happen. What we did have as a convergence play. So I'm very interested. I'm approaching this more of as a student, and I can't speak for anyone else, but really for myself. Talk about a digital twin. Like, I know my wife will say one of me is enough. So a digital twin or not digital twin, it's just too much. But at the same time, what very interestingly this week, so you see, I don't have a false background on today because I'm in the office with a working space in a private space to be able to join you for this. But this week has been shine a glaring light on what life has been like the last 2 years out of the office, and then being able to join a group of people, and what I missed, and also what makes you fatigued, right? And so I think it remains to be seen what happens with Web 3.0. And I see, if I take my privileged self out of the picture and see the application of the potential of the metaverse and Web 3.0, I see a lot of amazing possibilities, for everything from people who in the remote communities, once the infrastructure gets there, that they can access and be able to interact, for people with disabilities, and challenges who may not be able to interact in person. But for those of us who are fortunate to be able to have a choice at this moment in time, I find myself still choosing to take downtime and work remotely when I can. But this opportunity this week of being with my colleagues in a room, and and having real-time conversations and engaging in person, and being able to go to a baseball game or go to the art gallery HGO last night, and being able to sharing a drink in person, I found that it really put a contrast for me, a foil for me, what a glaring difference the last 2 years has been. It's been strangely familiar, right? Because something is almost like I almost forgot, but it's kind of like riding a bike that it's come back to me as I experienced it. So I'm curious to see where the convergence is a word I use often in professionally, and I'm really interested to see where did the Web 3.0 and this metaverse and our real universe, the 3D world, come together. And this in the 3D world, really you do miss an extra dimension. 2D and 3D, maybe there's one number different. But to see my colleagues with profile and be able to engage them in 3D world and in person, and be able to shake hands or high five, and being in online, and even if we're able to have an avatar of ourselves, when I see Avatar, by the way, all I can see is the Wii game that I used to play with my son, right? The Wii Sport game. But in the virtual world, I'm very curious as to where those two converge, and it's going to be a very personal experience. I think for each individual, it will hit differently, and where our shared experiences and where our personal independent experiences will lie. And I'm looking forward to seeing where this lands.
I'll just maybe put an apostrophe in there, in the sense that I agree that experience between 2D and 3D. I did see, Peter Diamandis present as a hologram, which was, 20 years in the waiting for me, because I used to talk about that technology. And I really felt him in front of me. He was noticing, different things. It was my Star Trek moment, right? Like, really, we have transponded. But if I look at kind of, where AR to VR, and we had this great discussion before, I think it was UBS that ran this, where they're sitting in the wealth division and the client's there, and they're aging the client in 3D. And suddenly that clients, I think they had almost a 50% uptake in engagement of better planning towards your retirement because there was that visual experience. And maybe I'm going to turn to Awane, and I really, I look augmented. Augmented is adding to help you understand reality. Virtual reality, kind of that next big skip. So, Awane, I know you've delivered some projects. Maybe you can talk about those, what the impact was, and if you were in banking, like where would you be starting to use this technology, and how does it link to our financial lives?
Sure. Before that, I'd like to go back to what Roy said before, because that's really an important key of what he said. Look, I'll give you an example. Right now, okay, I'm looking at this screen, right? I'm looking at the screen. I'm getting confused now. Do I look at the screen with you guys, or am I looking at the camera, right? Where should I look, right? There's a complete disconnect. But then if I meet you in person, Elisabeth or Roy or Peggy, we can see all of these small little things that we understand in time and space. Like if I say something that you don't like and your eyes kind of go up, or or you go like this or whatever. That's the kind of like the reason of why we want to see each other kind of in person. It's the what makes us human, right? Presence. Okay. Now let's revert now back to the metaverse, the thing that it's built on, and then the reason why this is such an incredible technology. First and foremost, I personally don't really feel that comfortable. I don't really like, and I still do it, I opt into platforms when I communicate with people. So Facebook, Instagram, whatever, I'm opting in, right? And so I give my privacy over. They're exchanging my data. I know it's happening and I'm aware of it, but I've opted in, but I don't feel that comfortable with it. Web 3.0, I don't have to do that. I don't have to do that. And when I communicate with you, Roy, or Peggy, or Elisabeth, there are new tools where I can feel the sense, I can feel the sense of presence. So putting on a VR headset and we can have this discussion. You can kind of see my eyebrows go up and down if there's something that I like or don't like. The fact of how we would interact if you were sitting right next to me is much closer. And that is the tool of that sits on top of Web 3.0 and the metaverse, is the search for presence. How can you and I sit together and communicate with one another or transact with one another in the most natural way that us as humans are? I hope I explained that correctly.
Well, I still kind of look at the, Star Trek transpond, right? So whether I'm moving a bunch of pixels in one direction, it's just a bunch of pixels over there, but it's still me. Like if you hadn't scared me, Awane, about the two very different digital selves, I'd be okay with that, right? Like I want to own my digital points and have those conversations. I think, we've talked about this evolution in traditional banking. And I think, as we look in Canada, as we start to head, I'd say like 98% of my life is fully digital banking. There isn't much other than trying to wire transfer money out of Canada. Although I have to say banks have made a big step there. I can pretty much transfer 30,000 out of Canada, no issue. Between two different banks in Canada, well, ouch, that hurts. That's a very painful process. But, we've done really well. And, this next realm of open banking and the access to data, there's conversations around decentralized finance. And I think that's really where we're starting to get into blockchain and then really this future of metaverse banking. And, where I've looked, and I love this quote, what if the future of banking wasn't a bank, right? I think we're starting to see a lot of activity where, Amazon is my bank of choice, right? 80% of what comes into my house is coming in through Amazon. So why am I not, I'm using Amazon's credit card. I'm using all of these things, which simplify my life with them. So I think a little bit over to this, what's happening here in this digital banking world. And, maybe, certainly US and UK and other areas are much farther ahead of us than open banking. And what are we starting to see? I mean, JP Morgan basically has, opened up a branch in the metaverse. Like, is this just all play, or is there a value to this effort and energy that's being focused there?
No, there's no value.
Yeah.
I'll throw it to Peggy there for a moment. Sorry.
So, I think it's always an evolution, so we are talking about the metaverse, while actually our current situation is already not ideal yet in terms of digital payments. As Roy was saying, you still need to print for your mortgage. So it's great that a bank open a branch in the metaverse. I would really like in my day-to-day life to be able to do things even more digitally. So it's always different lane. You're doing what's happening in the physical world while preparing for the AR and the VR, which is going to be totally different. So I think we're talking about different things. So if you look at what's been happening during the pandemic, what you see is really like an increase in the use of services and products that were already existing. So, for example, Wells Fargo was saying that 35% of increase in remote check deposits during the pandemic and 50% of growth in online wire transfer. So people didn't have the choice than to learn how to do these things. They might not even be aware before that it was possible. So that's the foundation you need in order to be able to go in this different step. And some youngster will definitely leapfrog that and go directly in some financial services, as you say, where I'm going to go with my avatar in my branch in the metaverse to buy my sunglasses for my avatar. I don't know what I'm going to buy over there, but that's a different story. So I think there is something that we're going to have to discuss at some point, and it's the regulation, because it's very complicated already today to see. Roy was mentioning open banking earlier. Canada is its own little island. Every country have their own little island moving a different direction. What do you do when you're in an environment that is global by nature, but have very different roles, And I think it's very important to keep in mind that regulations were put in place to protect us. The financial system is something that is very important. So I love having everyone talking about like crypto and being anonymous and this and that, but who does it really protect? Maybe not always the people who are going to use their money in the best way. So I think there are people who dodge taxes or all these things. So I think that's again the challenge we're going to see. So open banking, the lack of regulation in Canada slowed us down, and is still slowing us down. But I'm already thinking, like most of you, next step, and I'm like, if we don't have any regulation, you're going to see the same thing you've seen in China, where cryptocurrency started like booming, and because regulators were so late, they just like killed everything. So I don't know. I think that's something that will be a big challenge if regulators don't start putting a foot forward on what does it mean in totally virtual environment for financial services.
I think that's a really good point, Peggy, but I'm kind of curious, how do you build a geographic wall in something like crypto or in the metaverse? I don't know. Awane, you're building virtual sets and games. Is there such a thing as an impenetrable wall that you have
which
to
is
pass?
probably why it hasn't been done, because like people don't know how to handle things, so they just don't touch.
Listen, I mean, like Bitcoin right now is the adoption of Bitcoin right now is going at the same rate as the adoption of the internet at the early days. So, you know what I mean? It's happening, whether you like it, whether you don't like it, doesn't matter. It's happening. And so this whole Web 3.0 that's built on blockchain and Ethereum, like you ask a kid about gaming and how they buy their avatars and everything, to them, all this stuff already makes sense. You know what I mean? We're just kind of like building it out for adults as things are going. So this is inevitable. It's completely inevitable, and there's no way of slowing this down. It's just gonna increase, and it's gonna get faster. There's gonna be more and more of these protocols coming out, like smart contracts, like all that are just it's just inevitable.
Yeah,
inevitable doesn't mean that it's not gonna see a crackdown later. Like big tech was inevitable, and now 15 years too late. Everyone is looking and realizing that there is a lot of challenges, and they're called to testify every 3 weeks. So I'm not saying it's not happening. I'm just saying that at some point, people will realize that you still need to have guardrails, which right now doesn't seem to be the case.
So, when it comes to, I mean, obviously, Peggy, you and I play in the space, and we know that about regulators and working with governments and regulators. They are quite often understaffed, underfunded, under-resourced, and they're always behind the curve, right? From the U.S. perspective, and I think the Silk Road experience taught the federal regulators a lot about the need to look as far down the road. Doesn't mean that they're still better prepared, but it taught them a lot far down the road about what the potential of what was a block market, online block market, and what the anonymity can provide, both good and bad. And so for regulators, I have a lot of sympathy for regulators. The regulators, they to your point, they're trying to protect us from ourselves, and human nature being what it is. I love Jamie Dimon's comment a few years ago that banks should not be regulated; we can regulate ourselves. And in 2008, 2009, for those of them who still remember, when those guardrails moved a little bit, potential financial disasters can happen. But as far as and I don't think anything that we're talking about right now will stifle the nature of progress, but because let's say from the late 90s and through now, the pace of progress has not slowed down. It's certainly not slowed down people like Elon Musk, right? And innovating and pushing forward the space. What it has done, I think, is become very thought-provoking for people who are either fortunate like us, who are who sometimes we get into the echo chamber and talking about this all the time, and we get absorbed into it. But really, I mean, the world at large are quite often unaware or don't care about what a metaverse does. Just like open banking, right? We've talked about this. The world at large, honest, will not care what open banking, or you could call it whatever you want. All they will know is they want the convenience, the access, the flexibility, and the personalization that these technology offers. And I think that's where it's important for us to keep a focus on, whether you're coming from financial services or where you come as a retailer, and whether in the metaverse or in the old bricks and mortar world. So for a bank branch, like for banks like JPM or other banks that surely will open a metaverse or some other dimension presence, there got to be potentially a lot of advantage that can be had. I talked about this earlier. I alluded to remote communities being able to sit down with a financial advisor who specializes perhaps in working with far north First Nations people, who can provide them with education and financial literacy and access to different financial services when the infrastructure allows them to do that. It's going to be super valuable in expanding the world for those who may seem more cut off these days. And the branch banking, I think the concept of branch will likely come into a lot of evolutionary discussions, because once you have a virtual presence, really the concept of branch. There may still be those who like to go into a branch. I certainly don't. I mean, I haven't gone into a branch in a very long time, other than like I said, the ATM recently. But the fact that if you can blend an improved financial services, for example, mortgage that Peggy and I talked about before, with a virtual experience that we can sit down with our personal banker and conduct a transaction and be able to sign in virtually and through an e-signature platform, but be able to engage, perhaps not like Princess Leia and Obi-Wan recording a message, but be able to engage in real time and speak to each other as if we're sitting at a desk across from each other, and have that to want what talked about, like the engagement, and be able to see a lot more context than just this 2D engagement. I think that's where some of the opportunities really are. It's not going to replace my love of going to Starbucks, which I have right here, and picking up a coffee from Marissa. It's not going to change my love of walking to a bakery and being able to have the smell and picking out the croissant or the baguette that I want for myself. But for a lot of these services, I think that it's going to be an added dimension. And as much as we and what I am talking about, I guess, is again the convergence, right? It's convergence of traditional services merged with new technology and new way of expressing those services and being able to engage people in a different way. I think, to me, that's what I think I'm excited about. That giving the people the flexibility. And like I said, there are those who, again, I'm a privileged person. There are those who have, who may have social anxiety disorder, who don't like going out, those with disabilities. Offering these kinds of services through a virtual world will expand the world without pushing them to outside of their comfort zone. And I think those are the areas specifically that I'm really excited about at seeing and making this sounds really cliche, but making this a better world.
Exactly.
I'm going to touch on one point in there because, forgive my naivety perhaps in this, but, blockchain is immutable, right? And so when we talk about, regulatory aspects and walls, like the security of blockchain, we have a company in our portfolio, Naora's protocol, right? Which is, every single node that's being added in is actually verifying every other node from a security side. And that node is collecting tokens. Like it's this whole other world that's starting. And I'm trying to figure, why do we need geographic regulatory aspect if the fundamentals of blockchain basically say what's there has been validated and is real? Thank you.
We don't. No.
You pay taxes, you have a financial system, you have all these things, like we're not a global world. So I hear what you're saying, Awane, but that's not the reality of how it is right now.
But is it because we're resistant to it, or could it be real?
Well, how do you change the financial system overnight? So I can transfer money to Portugal and then to, I don't know, South Africa, and I don't have any, you cannot transfer money like that easily today because it's anti-money laundering, it's taxes, it's all of that. So it's unrealistic to say that in a virtual environment that doesn't happen anymore.
Well, I think just because blockchain, everything is so traceable, right? I mean, there is a 100% clear path versus the different ways that we're, laundering money today or doing other things. Like blockchain just removes all of that issue. But as I said, perhaps a very naive perspective on my behalf. Just and so where I look, sorry, Awane, go ahead.
Sorry, to add to what you're saying, Elisabeth, because this gets me excited, guys. Like I love the future, I love education and stuff like that. And by the way, I am absolutely no financial expert, so please take whatever I'm saying with a big grain of salt. But technology moves slow and then it moves fast. So if you look at what Apple did to Kodak, or what Netflix did to Blockbuster, or even YouTube did to broadcast, it moves slow, then it moves really fast. And if you look at the financial system, and again, like I said, I'm no expert, but guys, every single year our dollar is worth less. Every single year things cost more. Every single year the middle class is getting squeezed. Income inequality is increasing. You know what I mean? Whereas you have stable systems like Bitcoin, where over time those things keep increasing in terms of its value for a number of reasons, which I'm not going to get into right now. So when you have a whole generation that's going through that, and on top of it, they're being educated in what blockchain is. They're growing up with it. They're growing up with semi-metaverses, whether it's Roblox, whether it's Fortnite, etc. They're going to adopt to this new technology, to this new Web 3.0, this new much, much faster. And it's going to go slow, and then it's going to go fast.
I agree with that. And I think, we're just about down to our 5 minute. I was asking if there was any questions. If anyone has questions, please put them in the Ask the Speaker. If not, I think, kind of looking at how we move forward here, right? I think that ability to start to experiment, and maybe I'll throw this to Peggy and Roy certainly, with the work, and I said you're coming off of this 3 days internal strategic planning. I'm sure digital advancement in this level has probably come up in some of the conversations. So, where do you start? So I'm a financial institution. I mean, there's JP Morgan, right? Lots of resource. But let's talk about, Canadian financial system. So here's metaverse. Looking at digital payments, they're happening today. As I think Awane said, Fortnite. And how every evening there are more people on Fortnite than there are on Netflix, and there's a lot of financial transactions happening in there. So I think that ability to say, are we transacting in the metaverse? Absolutely. So how are banks going to catch up?
Peggy, you want to go first?
Yeah, why not? And I think there are already a lot of things that the banks are doing. It doesn't seem sexy because we've seen it for a while, but when you look at some infrastructure like the payment rails in Canada, for example, Payment Canada is very involved in that. This is the infrastructure that is needed to keep our financial system operating properly. It's not just me beaming money to Roy. It's large
Oh,
corporations.
please do. But if you want to send money, please do.
after the panel.
Let's try it. Let's put it to the test.
Let's see if it works. But
That's right.
it's large corporation paying their employees. It's a government, issuing money during the pandemic to citizens. So I think a lot of things, we've seen that during the pandemic. I'm sorry, the banks really showed up, and we take that for granted because they're large organizations, they're printing money and all of that. But that's been something. In Canada we use the bank, in the US we use over fintech. But again, it's very a la mode, like to say the banks suck and they don't know what they are doing. But plenty of very smart people, not just in small tech companies, there are smart people, and they know what they are doing. And to Awane's point, it moves slow, and then it goes fast. It's the same thing in banks.
Yeah, I'm an optimist at heart, right? And the opportunity of being engaged with executives and banks, and also a lot of the founders that those of us who are fortunate enough to be in the ecosystem, Peggy and Elisabeth, engaging in very, very bright founders and talking about their view of the future. So I think it's important though that I'm a history buff, and no company, no matter how large and no matter where you sit in the economy, is immutable to progress. And so one very, very importantly mentioned some names like Kodak, like Blockbuster, and even, dare I say, a BlackBerry. Even though I still miss my BlackBerry Bold 9000, which I think was the best device I ever used for sending email. But the fact of the matter is, it all comes down to DNA, and it all comes to the DNA of the organization, the leadership, and the people inside. Always come down to people, because those names are in the dustbin of history because of the resistance to progress, because of their sense of superiority in market positioning. And I think banks and some of us understand there's some arrogance in sometimes the financial institution. But I think there's enough smart people in the banks to understand that they're not immutable to progress, and that the progress is going to either leave them behind, where if they want to maintain their sense of as a pillar, as a foundational element within our society, they're going to have to progress. And progress means it means giving the customer the experience and the services, the products they need, and how do they progress? They maintain pace with that progress. And how much faster that progress will be going forward. It won't be the glacial pace, let's say, from the first half or throughout the 20th century, not that in the 21st century. And so the need to recognize that they too have to progress along with the customer in the market is important. But I met enough bright people inside these financial institutions, and look, there are generational changes always at the head of the table, at the CEO and the C-suite, and Daryl White, who's the CEO of BMO right now, he's actually a year younger than me, and I wonder what I've been doing in my life when Daryl's in the CEO chair. But at the same time, there are going to be a lot of these forward-thinking leaders coming up in the ranks who will be leading the banks of the future, and whether banks as an institution exists the way we understand it today, or will it be disintermediated and disintegrated into packages of services or as an aggregator service. Again, that remains to be seen. There are a lot of, we've heard all the opinions on that. And that's part of the why I love the work I'm doing, because it's part of the investigative process, right? It's working with our clients, figuring out what that means, and also in reaching into Awane's world and ask those questions like, what does that mean for banking customers in the future? What does that mean for banking service in the future, for banking products? And so I think these conversations and Awane's respects are very relevant, because ultimately is Awane's people, his tribe, that we're going to have to serve as well in the future for financial services. So how do we make sure they're part of the financial inclusion, and how do we raise the level of financial literacy, because that's still an important part of the self-regulating effect is understanding. I read a headline. I didn't read the whole report. I read a headline this week that they did a study about the cryptocurrency holders and investors, and they found across age groups a very high level of technology literacy, but a relatively low level of financial literacy. Exactly. when it comes to cryptocurrency. And I find that interesting because it's the disparity between the two types of knowledge, and where one is starting to leap ahead, and in the ideal world you would want society to be advancing on both fronts, right? And so how do we advance on both fronts to make sure that level of financial literacy starts to keep pace with technology literacy, so that those of us and look, I think there are a lot of great things about privacy and important thing about privacy, but at the same time, there are those, and we talk about this all the time again in financial inclusion. There are the vulnerable segment of society who need to be protected, because there are bad actors. And anyway, whether you're dealing with fiat currencies or dealing with cryptocurrencies.
All right. I do apologize because I love this conversation, but I think we're a wrap. And Jamil, I'm sorry we didn't get to your question on fiat currencies, but I want to thank the panelists. We're going to get the hook. And I think just on everything that I've heard today, my recommendation to banks is on knowledge, get your employees knowledgeable, right? Like that's a first step. Have them thinking forward, and that's going to move the bank forward. So thank you so much. Thank you so much, Canada Payments. It has been. Awane, last word.
I have one last word I'll say for banks. Banks, yes, sometimes they move slow, but you guys are sitting on a lot of cash. My suggestion to you is to double down, triple down, quadruple down on helping accelerators, because that's where the innovation is going to come. Put more money into them, put more money into startups, because it's not going to come from within the banks, it's going to come from without. So go support those accelerators, go support those startups. You're going to see magic happening.
Yes.
That's a plug for Holt right there.
Thank you so much. All right. Have a wonderful day, everybody.
Have a great day. Bye-bye. Thank you. Bye.